People say time heals everything. What they never tell you is that time also hides things, buries them under routine, silences them beneath smiles, teaches pain how to sit quietly in the corner of a marriage and behave. I tried. God knows I tried. I told myself I could manage Jerald, manage the silences, manage the performance of perfection, manage the way our marriage looked flawless in public and fractured in private. What I hadn't prepared for, what no one ever warns you about, was his mother, Sarah Madison Blackstone. Powerful, influential, sharp-tongued, a media mogul whose name alone could close doors or open empires. To the world, she was elegance and authority wrapped in tailored suits and ruthless ambition. To me, she was suffocating, crushing, relentless. Her obsession with children, my failure to give her one, was a daily assault disguised as concern. It was our 7th wedding anniversary. The morning light had barely settled when my phone vibrated on the nightstand. Her name lit up the screen before my eyes were fully open. No good morning. No happy anniversary. Instead, her voice, precise, cold, perfectly measured, reminded me of barrenness, of absence, of my supposed inadequacy. 7 years, Abigail, she said, lingering on my name like it tasted bitter. A woman's body doesn't wait forever. I stared at the ceiling while her words pressed into my chest, heavy and familiar. The room smelled faintly of Jerald's cologne, clean, expensive, distant. He was still asleep beside me, breathing evenly, untouched by the weight settling on my ribs. Her cruelty wasn't loud. It never needed to be. It was surgical. With each anniversary, the pressure grew heavier. The cost of Jerald pretending to be perfect, perfect husband, perfect heir, perfect billionaire son, was slowly dismantling me. My relationship with Sarah Madison Blackstone didn't just deteriorate over time, it corroded. Not only because of the constant accusations, not only because of the whispers about doctors, fertility clinics, options, but because I, Abigail Blackstone, was being offered up like a pawn, a placeholder, a sacrifice. She never let me forget it. You should be grateful, she'd say. You married into a legacy. You wear a name women would kill for. Blackstone, a name that stretched across continents, across newsrooms and shipping lanes, across pharmaceutical boardrooms and stock exchange tickers. Blackstone and Blackstone Pharmaceuticals, listed on the New York Stock Exchange, untouchable, untarnished. And yet she never let me forget that the name did not belong to me. I hadn't earned it. I wasn't worthy of it. I was merely borrowing it until I proved my value. And value to Sarah Madison Blackstone had only one definition: a child. By the time Jerald finally woke up, smiling, reaching for me, whispering happy anniversary, something inside me had already hardened. I smiled back because that was my role, because that was the version of me the world expected. But inside, something had shifted. 7 years wasn't just a milestone, it was a warning. This wasn't just my anniversary. This was the beginning of something explosive. Something buried for years was stirring, and when it surfaced, it would not be quiet. It would blow your mind. If you want to know the twist and what awaits Sarah Madison Blackstone, comment, like, and subscribe. This story has only just begun. Jerald Blackstone was everything the world admired: a billionaire before 40, a visionary investor with a ruthless eye for opportunity. He could smell potential where others saw ruin. Failed companies came to him like patients on life support. He bought them cheap, stripped them down to their skeletons, and rebuilt them with surgical precision, and turned them into gold mines. shipping routes resurrected, media houses reborn, pharmaceutical acquisitions transformed into market leaders. His name carried weight in boardrooms and whispered respect in elite social circles. Jerald didn't just inherit wealth, he multiplied it. He was calm where others panicked, strategic where others gambled, a man who understood timing, leverage, and silence. Society adored him because he appeared balanced and powerful, but approachable, and wealthy but restrained. The kind of man other men wanted to emulate. And yet, beneath the tailored suits and curated charm, Jerald Blackstone had one fatal weakness: his mother. Madison Blackstone didn't just raise him. She engineered him, controlled him, conditioned him to fear her disappointment more than public failure. Every victory still required her approval. Every decision carried the invisible weight of her gaze. And despite everything Jerald had conquered, Madison remained unconquerable. What Jerald wanted most, what haunted him quietly, was something simple: normalcy. He wanted to be seen as an ordinary married man, not a legacy, not an heir, and not a Blackstone product, just a husband, a man with a wife, a family, a life that didn't feel staged or supervised. But Jerald carried a truth no balance sheet could erase. He was sterile, yet he was tall, confident, and good-looking. He was a man any woman would do anything to keep, as a friend and a husband. Yet he was sterile, medically and irreversibly so. Sexually, he couldn't perform, so reproduction was impossible. His body bore a history no one could see, no scars, and no warning signs, just a silent medical verdict that stripped him of the one thing his mother worshipped most: legacy through blood. I was the only one who knew, the only one who had sat across from him in a cold medical office, listening to the words fall like broken glass. The only one who saw his hands tremble, not from fear of poverty or loss of power, but from shame. Jerald was not defined by his potency, but he was haunted by it. He begged me not to tell her, not because he didn't trust me, but because he knew her. Madison Blackstone was not a woman you confided in. She was a woman you survived. She won through extreme intimidation, through pressure, through psychological warfare disguised as maternal concern. Vulnerability was the currency she spent against you. So Jerald chose silence. And silence made me the villain. Madison never stopped grumbling, never stopped reminding me that her mansion, Jerald's fortress of glass, steel, and surveillance, was too quiet, that it lacked the cries of grandchildren, that its marble halls echoed with absence. Unaware of her son's condition, she blamed me for everything. Every glance was an accusation. Every question was a trap. Every visit felt like a trial. She watched me closely, waiting for weakness, waiting for proof, waiting for the moment she could pounce. And Jerald stood beside me but never fully in front of me. He loved me in private, protected me in subtle ways, shielded me from her worst moments by distraction, distance, diplomacy. But he never confronted her with the truth, never dismantled the lie that was destroying me. Because confronting Madison meant shattering the illusion of perfection he had spent his life building. So I carried the blame. I carried the shame. I carried his secret. And Madison sharpened her claws, unaware that the real betrayal was not my body, but her refusal to see her son as anything other than flawless. What none of them knew was that silence, once held too long, becomes dangerous. And when the truth finally demands air, it does not ask politely. That night, Jerald sat on the edge of the bed, his back to me, shoulders slightly hunched, as though the air itself had grown too heavy to carry. I knew that posture. I knew that silence. It was the silence he wore when numbers didn't add up, when a deal looked profitable on paper but rotted underneath. Only this time, there were no spreadsheets, no boardroom, just us and the quiet. I slid off the bed and sat beside him, wrapping my arms around his waist, resting my cheek against his back. His body was warm, familiar but rigid, like a man bracing for impact. "There's something bothering you," I said softly. He turned to look at me, really look at me. His eyes, usually so composed, so certain, were clouded, searching. "You've stood by me all these years," he said slowly. "You know how much I love you." Something in my chest tightened. Jerald never spoke like this unless he was preparing to dismantle something. "Jerald," I asked, forcing calm into my voice, "is everything okay?" He nodded, then shook his head, a contradiction he didn't bother correcting. "You know I'd do anything for you," he continued. "Yes," I said, though unease had already begun creeping up my spine. "I know." He took a deep breath, the kind that scrapes the lungs on the way in. "There's something you should know, something I haven't told you, not anyone." My mind raced. Instinctively, I thought of Madison, of her iron grip, of her obsession with legacy and bloodlines and control. I braced myself for news about her, another demand, another threat, another impossible expectation. But Gerald's face told me I was wrong. This wasn't about her. "There's a clause in the family will," he said quietly. "It's about protecting the Blackstone legacy." The words landed heavily, but before I could respond, his voice broke through again. Faster now, urgent, as if stopping would destroy him. "I'm adopted." The room tilted. For a moment, sound vanished. The world shrank to the space between us, to the look on his face, raw, exposed, unarmored. "I'm not a Blackstone by blood," he said. "I never was." It felt like a bomb had been detonated, not loudly, not theatrically, but with the kind of force that collapses foundations silently. Not wealth, not power, but truth. Jerald Blackstone, billionaire, heir, empire builder, was not a true Blackstone. And suddenly everything made sense. The pressure, the fear, the obsession with perfection, the terror of being found out. The implications were staggering. Before I could even begin to process it, before the shock could settle, he spoke again. "There's more." My heart sank. "They're asking me to fix it." I frowned. "Fix what?" He swallowed hard. "They want me to make sure there's an heir, a child, one that can't be questioned." My stomach twisted. "And how exactly do they expect you to do that?" I asked, though dread had already answered for me. His eyes dropped to the floor. "I need your help to arrange it." I stared at him, breath shallow. "Arrange what, Jerald?" His voice came out barely above a whisper. "I'm sure how much Danny likes you. He never stops talking about you." "Jerald, you've lost me. What exactly are planning on doing to Danny?" "You know what I'm talking about, Abigail. Leave you two to it. Perhaps get him drunk, spike his drink. Whichever works. That way you sleep with him." The words hit like a slap. "What?" I stood up abruptly. "Jerald, are you okay? Do you hear yourself?" He looked up at me, eyes glossy, desperate, not cruel, not careless, but cornered. "That way it's cleaner," he said. "Quieter. No scandal. No questions asked. The child would pass as mine." I felt sick. This wasn't just betrayal. It was annihilation, and it's demeaning. "So let me understand this," I said slowly, my voice trembling despite myself. "You're asking which is better?" He nodded, shame etched into every line of his face. A billionaire husband offering his wife to his best friend to hide his impotence, he said bitterly. Or, he added, the alternative. The alternative we just discussed. Truth, exposure, collapse. I stared at the man I loved, the man who had built empires from ruins, and realized that the one thing he had never learned to do was destroy the lie he was built on. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. Jerald's world wasn't crumbling because of money or power. It was crumbling because of fear, because of legacy, because of a mother who taught him that survival mattered more than honesty, and because the cost of silence had finally become unbearable. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood there, suspended between the woman I had been and the woman I was becoming, while the weight of Jerald's words pressed into my chest like a held breath that refused to release. Adopted, sterile, a legacy built on silence. And now, this. I looked at him, really looked at my husband, and for the first time in 7 years, I saw him stripped of all the armor I had helped polish. No billions, no boardrooms, no last name heavy enough to shield him. Just a frightened man who had learned, far too early, that love was conditional and survival required performance. And yet, it was me standing on the altar of that survival. Something inside me began to unravel, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet precision of a woman finally seeing the shape of her own erasure. I thought of every accusation Madison had hurled at me, every sideways glance, every conversation where my body was discussed like faulty machinery. And all this time, I had been bleeding for a truth that wasn't mine to carry. I had protected him. I had lied for him. I had endured shame meant for him. And now, in the name of preserving a legacy that wasn't even biologically his, my dignity had become negotiable. I felt something unfamiliar rise beneath the heartbreak. Anger, not the wild kind, the focused kind, the kind that sharpens your vision instead of blurring it. Jerald talked about options, about solutions, about what would be easiest, as if my body were a line item, as if consent were implied by love. I realized then that the most dangerous lies aren't told maliciously. They're told gently, wrapped in desperation, disguised as sacrifice. He wasn't asking me to betray him. He was asking me to disappear. And in that moment, a truth settled into my bones with terrifying clarity. Love that requires your self-annihilation is not love. It is captivity dressed as devotion. I had spent 7 years trying to prove my worth to a woman who despised me, defending a man who hid behind me, and carrying a surname that had never truly been mine. But standing there with the truth finally exposed, I understood something Madison never anticipated. I was no longer afraid of losing the Blackstone name, because what I had already lost, quietly, obediently, was myself. And I was done paying for secrets that were never mine to keep. I didn't know yet what I would do. I didn't know how this would end, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, I would not be the one sacrificed. And Danny, without his knowledge, without his consent, he had been recast as a solution to keeping the Blackstone legacy. Danny had become a tool, a weapon against the truth. The realization made my stomach turn. It wasn't just that Jerald had asked me to betray myself, or that he had been willing to sacrifice our marriage on the altar of legacy. It was that he had been prepared to destroy two people at once, and call it a strategy. I walked slowly to the mirror and stared at my reflection. I looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted. The woman staring back at me understood, finally, that the danger wasn't just Madison. It wasn't just the family will or the suffocating expectations or the billions built on appearances. It was the fact that the powerful don't just defend money, they defend their position, they defend access, they defend inheritance and legacies, not just for their children, but for the idea that they deserve to remain on top. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't random. This wasn't chaos. This was strategy. Every gate kept, every policy delayed, every opportunity rationed. Because legacy, to them, isn't something you build and share. It's something you fortify. That realization changed how I moved through the world. I had come to a conclusion, quietly at first, then with unsettling clarity, that the powerful, the rich, the wealthy would do anything to protect their wealth and their legacy at all costs, not out of cruelty alone, but out of fear. Fear of losing relevance, fear of slipping into obscurity, fear of becoming what they once looked down on. I saw it in Madison, in Jerald, and in the closed-door meetings where smiles never reach the eyes, in the polite conversations that mask ruthless calculations, in the way systems were bent, rules rewritten, and ladders quietly pulled up once the summit was reached. I left Jerald, and I left one of the most influential family names in the world, the Blackstones. Now, 4 years later, I'm happily married to a caring and lovely man with 2 children of our own.